I consider that to be probably the biggest honor anyone could have in their career, when someone comes to you, probably the most difficult time in their life, and says, can you help me with this issue that's going to impact my career and my family probably in perpetuity.
How did you decide that you wanted to pursue law in the first place?
I actually studied international politics and economics and foreign languages in undergrad, and I was very close to applying for a PhD economics program instead of going to law school. But I figured, how bad could it be? And everyone says that practicing law is very versatile. The degree is pretty versatile, so you don't really have to make any decisions. But really, when you end up going to law school and you take out loans to go to law school, you end up usually having to practice law. And I say having, but honestly, I can't imagine doing anything else. It was an outstanding decision, but one that I would not have anticipated, many moons ago. It's one that just I happened to fall into and suited my personality well.
And then geographically, why was Albany the right place to start your career?
Also a very good decision. So there is a pool of incredibly talented attorneys in this area. Absolutely a pleasure to work with, to have people work here for me and with me. Some phenomenal colleagues in the area, and it just seems it's centrally located. It's easy to travel to various places. The overhead is pretty competitive in comparison to, for example, our Washington, D.C. office. So it just made sense, and it continues to make sense as we expand in upstate New York.
And so what was the point in your career where you decided that you would start your own firm?
It was a little bit of baptism by fire, actually. So I also probably wouldn't have pegged myself as someone who just decided to start their own firm, but eventually when you create your own practice area and you have an independent client base, it can make sense, and it certainly does make sense if some of the values that you have practicing law, for example, in terms of being able to take on pro bono cases, being able to work out competitive and flexible fee arrangements so you can represent and litigate the clients that you actually want to represent. And it's not just a question of dollars and cents as it is in some law firms. So that was really important for me, and that provided probably the greatest impetus to go out on my own.
Have you faced any barriers along the way?
Well, I don't even think I looked old enough to drive when I opened up my law firm, so that was one significant barrier. You could always see the look on clients' faces when you travel and you've been dealing with them for a year or two and you meet them for the first time and they're like, my God, you're young. I've grown out of that to some extent now. It's not as dramatic of a thing, but when we just started out, you could try to rent commercial office space and everyone's looking at you like, who's this kid that wants to, does she really have a firm? Or, even I was just, when I started practicing law, I think I was just old enough to be able to rent cars, So there were a series of barriers because of age, but with that also came an advantage. I had, I didn't have a tremendous risk aversion, which I think that a lot of people develop the more entrenched they are in a certain practice or area and the more they allocate time to doing this. And I was really excited and driven for a lot of business owners and attorneys that, you have to have a certain appreciation for risk. And most aversion to risk, I think, is a fear of failure, which is probably the biggest lesson that I've learned when practicing law and having a law firm, that look, no one who is really successful hasn't failed repeatedly. And in fact, I actually think that really successful people are just masterful failures. So I try to keep that in mind also.